Hey y'all, welcome back to day 2 of our How to Start a Sourdough Starter series. Thank you, Jesus. It is another beautiful day to be in the kitchen, and I am really excited because my sourdough starter, my new sourdough starter, is exactly 24 hours old. I mean, exactly 24 hours old. So, like I said yesterday, in part 1, I was going to check it at the 12-hour mark, which was 12:08 last night. So I came downstairs and I looked at it. It wasn't looking like anything, like nothing, because that's what you expect on day 1 of a sourdough starter. Oh, I did notice that since mine is not covered, it was looking a little dry on the top. So if that happens to you, what I did, I just took maybe like a teaspoon of water and poured it right on, just don't stir it in, just poured it right on top. That prevents, don't stir it in, just pour the water on there. That prevents it from drying, the liquid in it evaporating out because this water is sitting on top of it. That liquid did and does eventually evaporate. But if you notice yesterday where we started, if you can, it's so light in my kitchen right now, if you can see it. So yesterday we started at this mark, which is the black mark. And if you notice, my starter has actually risen, and now we're up about, that's a good ½ inch. It's risen. So my starter in 24 hours is already beginning to be active. Now, what do we do at this point with the starter? We're not going to discard any of it. Some bakers tell you to discard it. I don't like to do that because I don't really see at this point where that's necessary. So I'm just going to go ahead and remove the cover. And you can see, oh wow, it doesn't smell sour at this point but you can hear little rich bubbles in there. That's really nice. So I'm going to grab a spatula and just stir this up before I feed it again. Okay, so I've got a spatula. I'm just gonna go ahead and give this a stir. And I'm gonna get an overhead shot of this so you can see what it looks like too. So no worries, I'm gonna zoom in on this so you can see what it looks like. But I can already see little things happening in here. That's because of the whole grain rye flour. It really, or whole wheat, as I say, you can use either one. They have more, I want to say goodness in them than the all-purpose flour. So it really jumpstarts it if you can use either one of those in a small amount to help double feed your sourdough starter, because it's like you're double feeding it, really. You're giving it all-purpose, which is good, but you're also giving it that extra boost to really kickstart it. It's like an extra dose of caffeine for your morning. So one thing I want to say, because I think this is only fair that I say it, if after 24 hours your starter doesn't look like this, do not worry. And I can't emphasize that enough. A sourdough starter is about, number one, it's about patience. Even if you've never made anything like this before a day in your life, the most important thing to know about a sourdough starter or sourdough bread or anything connected to sourdough is patience. Just let it be. It will do something eventually. So the reason why mine is all nice is I already have an established starter in my kitchen that is letting out all these lovely little wild yeasts that are already well cultivated and they are mature. It's a mature starter. So my sourdough starter can pick up and feed off all of that. So it'll get started and jump started a little more quicker than if I didn't have any, like if I didn't bake at all, your starter would take a little longer. However, you don't have to have an established starter to help a new starter. Because like I say, a sourdough starter depends on wild yeast that lives in the air. So there is wild yeast in your kitchen regardless of whether you bake or not. If you have fruit in your kitchen, there's a lot of wild organic yeast living on that fruit. If you have grapes and bananas or apples or whatever it is in your kitchen, if you open the doors, open the windows, there's a lot of wild organic yeast is floating in. So don't worry. Your starter will eventually do something. When I first started Miriam was really, really quiet for a few days, and I just kept going through the process. And eventually she picked up and went on. So this starter, because it has a little help from Miriam living in the house as well, it's able to feed off of the organic yeast that Miriam is giving off. So that's the only reason why mine may be a little bit more active than, so quickly. But if you don't see anything after 24 hours, don't worry. Go through the process of what we're about to go through now with your starter, and just keep your patience, because let patience have her perfect work, as it says in the Bible. So let patience have her perfect work and give her some time, because it'll happen. So we're going to go ahead and give this starter its first feed. And how we do that is just to feed it just like you did yesterday. So remember our ratio of 60 grams or a quarter of a cup. Now you can have that if you feel like that could be, like if you're like mine, I may do half of that. Now let me explain, because that sounds like I'm sending you in two different directions. If your starter you see no bubbles, no activity after 24 hours, feed it a full feed. Don't give it a half feed. 60 grams of flour, 60 grams of water. And I'm going to once again use 3/4 of all-purpose flour and 3/4 of my organic rye flour. Go ahead and give it that full 60-60 even ratio of feed. Now, because my starter is already showing signs of activity, I'm going to give mine half feed. Why? Because it's already showing that it's getting somewhere. So I'm going to give it a half feed, because if I give it a full feed, then I would have to discard half of this. You see what I mean? You have to discard half of it if you're going to go ahead and give it a full feed, because you could end up with way more starter than you need. And not only that, it's not helpful. I mean, it's like having, your car doesn't drive any better, whether it's full of people or is only one person, the driver. Your car is pretty much going to drive the same. So the same thing with your sourdough starter. So since mine is already showing bubbles, I'm going to go ahead and give it a half feed. So I'm going to start off with my water, which today for me is 30 grams. So go ahead and add 30 grams. Another tip for your 31 grams. Okay. Another tip for your sourdough starter is, if your house is cold, and I mean cold, or your office is cold, your bakery is cold, or wherever you keep your starter, use some warm water. What I mean by warm is just skin temperature warm. That will help it to encourage it a little bit. And this tip goes anytime, whether it's an established starter or a brand new starter. Feed it a little bit use a little warm or warmer water than just plain tap water. Now in the summertime, the opposite is true. When my starter is a little overactive in the summertime and I'm not keeping it in the fridge, I feed it with cold water. That kind of helps to balance it out, because a sourdough starter can get overactive. And I'll talk about that in the coming series, but they can get a little overactive, and you don't want to put them in the refrigerator, but you do want to slow them down a little bit. So that's the tip. If you want to speed it up and encourage it, and if it's sitting in a cool place, feed it with a little warm water, skin temperature warm. Okay, so let me clear this out and then go ahead and add in my flour. So I'm going to add in 20 grams of my all-purpose unbleached flour. That's 20 grams. And I'm going to add in 10 grams of my rye flour. Because as I say, you never want to use all rye. Some people do. I found that is a little too strong for a starter. But that's just what I found. You may experiment and find that it works out nicely. So just go ahead and stir that in, just like that. Flowers flying all over the kitchen. Now, as I say, depending on where you are, you may need to add a few drops more of water. If you have to add more water, because remember, it's more about your consistency of your starter than it is about numbers per se. So I think, for me, I think this is just perfect. So let me zoom in so you can get an easier shot. For me, this is just the perfect consistency. It's like a, if you've ever made macarons, it's like a thick batter that's way thicker than pancake batter. It shouldn't be runny. If it's runny, it's too loose. And it's not good to have a runny starter, period. So as I said yesterday, I'm not going to scrape this off on the edges because I don't want to mess up the edge of my jar. Now we've got doubled. Literally, we've added double the amount of what we had in our sourdough starter. We now have double. So it's time to make a new mark. So I'm going to grab my marker. Thank you, scale. I'm done with you. I'm going to grab my marker and I'm going to go ahead and add another mark. So I'm just going to put it here. I'm just going to put my mark there. And as I say, cover it once again. Now, for this 24 hours, this is really the only period that you're going to cover it. And to leave it open, I say covered, you're going to put a covering over it that's a breathable covering. After this, you will need to start covering it more closed because it will continue, it will dry out. So as I did last night, if you check this at 12 hours and you notice it's dry looking on top, just pour just a little teeny water, float a little water on top, and that'll prevent it from drying out. Now, this will sit for another 24 hours without being fed. Once again, at the 12-hour mark, which now for me will be 12:30, at the 12-hour mark, I am going to stir it. Just like I did last night, just uncover it, take your spatula and stir it, and cover it back up and leave it again. Stirring your sourdough starter helps, and I read this in a book somewhere some time ago. This lady was talking about it, and she was saying one thing you can do to help a sourdough starter is to stir it. You know, she was saying it's not always the feeding of it, but just give it a good stir here and there. And she was like, it helps it a lot. And she was absolutely right. She was an old timer, and she owned an inn, a bread and breakfast inn in New England. And she specialized in sourdough goods for her, catering for the bed and breakfast. And she was like, that's really most of the time what people need to do. They don't always need to keep feeding a starter. They need to stir it. She was 1000% right. And I wish I knew her name and I remember her book so I could mention her, but she was right about that. So once again, at the 12-hour mark, just give it a stir. No need to feed. And the good Lord willing, we will be back tomorrow at 12 o'clock. And we will step on to the next step and we'll do a first discard of the sourdough starter. Because at that point, it's time to pour off some of this and then give it another feed. And that'll be the first discard. And then we'll talk about what you can do with that discard. Because at this point, this sourdough starter is not ready to bake with. She needs a few more days. So give her another day and then we'll come back and we'll see how far up the mark Little Miss New Sourdough is moving. So if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to my channel so you won't miss it. Starting a new sourdough starter is always exciting. And in this series, I want to just share with you all what the Lord has allowed me to learn, because I've been baking sourdough bread for many years, and a lot of it was messing up, and I've thrown away quite a few loaves, and I've thrown out some starters. So that's an important thing to know too. It's not the end of the world if you do have to throw out a starter. I have killed starters. I have let starters die, mostly out of laziness. I was too busy or too lazy to feed them. But we'll talk about how to maintain a starter in a stress-free way, because so many people think, well, I can't go anywhere if I have a starter. I have to take it with me on vacation. And you can, if you choose to take it with you on vacation. I don't take starters with me on vacation. I do know some people who do, but I don't take it with me on vacation. But in this series, I'll show you what to do with your starter when you do want to take a break from sourdough starter, or if you want to go on vacation. So, the good Lord willing, I will see you guys again in part 3 of our series, How to Start a Sourdough Starter. Take care, y'all. Bye.